So anyway, Mitch Richards here with Key Columbia Free, a programmer with 89.5 KOPN. I've got a few moments here with Dwayne Carey. He's the sheriff of Boone County here in Missouri. And I'd just like to ask him some questions. So thanks for taking this time with me, Sheriff. Quick question here. First of all, regarding the drug war, we've had some incidences here in town. Specifically, I'm sure you know about the Whitworth raid where they shot the dogs, and there was sort of a big scandal about that. And nationwide, we have a lot of sort of these SWAT, what some even would call paramilitary raids. Guys in black uniforms, whether in the day or the darkness of night, automatic weapons, that kind of thing. Do you think that the drug war, not only locally here in Boone County, but also nationally, do you think that it's gotten excessive in recent years? Do you think there have been excesses both at the national level and at local level? What would you say to that?
As far as what law enforcement's doing?
Yeah, what law enforcement does, the way the laws are enforced, the way, especially with the use of dynamic entries, particularly, as Chief Burton calls them.
Well, I mean, the thing about it, and again, I don't look to see what other departments are doing because I'm concerned about my department, but for example, if we have that type of case, my drug detectives will do surveillance. They might send a confidential informant inside the house. We're going to identify whether there's kids in the house, whether there's dogs in the house, what the layout of the house is. Then that step, the next step is to go to the division commanders. All of that is then run through me. So it kind of gets back to what I was talking about with the oversight as I was answering Dan's questions, is that the oversight to make sure that we're doing it well. And we had a similar one to where essentially we set up on the house and waited for the individual to come outside, and then we went ahead and took him down and then executed the search warrant, which then in turn we didn't have to do the dynamic entry. So we still...
Well, I mean, so basically saying, though, you're in the Whitworth raid, you're saying that essentially that was a botched raid. It was a mistake. They didn't do the right job.
I'm not saying that at all because I don't know all the facts to the case.
Okay.
I'm just saying that we might do
a little more
differently.
Okay.
And again, it's the way that we're structured as far as having the drug detectives report up the chain to make sure that we're going through 2 or 3 chains that everybody feels good about. Okay, yeah, we're going to do this dynamic entry, or hey, no, we're not going to do it. We need to sit on the house, or let's wait till tomorrow, or whatever the case might be.
See what surveillance might turn up. Okay, well, you know, there's been an issue not only with the cameras, but you know, you have in your as sheriff, in your tenure as sheriff, the sheriff department here in Boone County has obtained several COPS grants from the Department of Justice, and you know, I mean, I guess you made a comment in there that sort of caught my attention, and that is the idea that the taser or some of these other things like license plate scanners, like iris scanners, that these are sort of tools, new tools that law enforcement needs. Now, if we look at here in our community, you know, as Ethan Thampy just said here at this event, that part of the drug war, at least his thesis, his claim, is that local law enforcement, the relationship between local law enforcement and local people, communities, is being taken away, is being usurped by the federal government. And I guess my question is, you've sought this federal money for the iris scanners, for the license plate readers, and how is that not a confirmation of some of the claims that Ethan made, that the federal government is using influence, incentives, money, training, equipment, whatever, to take away what should be your relationship with me, for example, or with other people in this county? What do you say to all that?
I say, how is that taken away from the relationship that I have with you? If I'm able to provide my deputies with better equipment to do their job more efficiently, more professionally, what would the citizens of Boone County not like about that?
Well, I guess, for example, you said, and I have another question about that, but just the fact that you are supposed to be accountable to us here in Boone County. You know,
I am.
You're the highest law enforcement officer here.
Correct. You're
supposed to protect us from not only criminals, but also injustice from the government. And don't you think that's a conflict of interest to, on the one hand, have that duty, and on the other, taking money from the federal government, which in certain cases, whether it's a drug war or in other cases, and I don't want to get too much into politics, but there's definitely, you don't think that there's a conflict of interest there, that you're serving kind of two masters, the federal government and the local community?
How am I serving the federal government?
Just in the sense that money is influence. I mean, that you're getting funding from them, so you have to answer to them in some way. You have to follow certain standards, maybe meet certain criteria for the use of the iris scanners, for example, or the readers.
The only time that you have standards on you is when you have personnel.
Okay.
So if the license plate readers, for example, there is no standard. Once we buy that piece of equipment, we can decide we're going to put it on 2 cars, 4 cars, 2 fixed locations. The federal government doesn't say how we have to use that equipment. Now, if
it just has to be used for that equipment. It can't be used for something else.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. But your question relates more to people.
Okay.
So if, say right now, the federal government wanted to give me 2 positions, but they wanted me to use those for going out, and I'll use Proposition B,
okay,
to check for dog kennels.
Right.
I got more important things that I need to do to serve the constituents of
And some would even say you have more important things to do than maybe get pot dealers here in the community. Some would say that. I know that's all.
Okay.
But some would say that.
All right. So I'm trying to protect and serve and do what's best, at least I think, in the interest of the constituents, and so that's the direction that I'm going to go in. So I'm not going to answer to the federal government on personnel, but if there is money to purchase equipment, especially in this economy, to where our budget is tight, and it's a tool that allows my folks to do a better job and more efficient, proficient, professional, I'm going to take it every time.
But I mean, if you're funny you mentioned the economy. I mean, we because there's obviously problems that Boone County, we can't support all this equipment, so the feds have to pay for it. But if the feds are borrowing money or printing money in order to provide that equipment, how's it any better?
As far as
as far as funding, you're getting the equipment.
We're getting the equipment,
but it's still the taxpayer's still paying for it, and it's not only just this taxpayer, but it's a future taxpayer. Well, fair enough. Okay, so but going back to the question of excess. We have you have the license plate readers, the iris scanners in this community. We have surveillance cameras going up in the public venues. We have red light cameras, and not here, but in other localities, municipalities, we have RFID chips being put into computers that children get, school buses, school backpacks. When does it become excessive? When do we become a surveillance society with all this stuff? Do you think that we're not there yet?
No, we're not there yet.
Okay,
we're not there yet. I'll tell you. I've got twin boys that are 16 years old. If they're downtown to see a movie or to hang out with friends, I want them to be as safe as they can possibly be. Mm-hmm. If somebody's dealing 15 pounds of marijuana, it is our job to take that marijuana off the street.
Okay.
So,
but you would admit that there's a balance between safety, as you just mentioned, but also liberties.
Oh, by all means.
And that's something that we need to be sort of vigilant about as far as the citizenry and law enforcement, wouldn't you say?
I would say yes, but I'd say that we're not at a point where government,
mm-hmm.
Uncle Sam or
anyone
has taken that over yet.
Okay.
I feel comfortable where we're at. And again, license plate readers, we talked about that earlier. Mm-hmm. If we can run a car with a license plate reader through a parking lot and locate a stolen vehicle, and it's your stolen vehicle, wouldn't you want us to locate your stolen vehicle?
Sure, it's just that the question is it right for you to be able to go through a parking lot and know the identity of every person like that?
We don't know the identity of every person. We just know the license plate.
Right, but which you can use to find out. You can find that out. Obviously, you don't do it for every person.
But we don't need a license plate reader for that. I can use the radio and call joint communications. So what I'm saying is, if I'm driving through that lot and I don't have the license plate reader and you're missing your stolen car,
you'll find out.
Well, if I don't have the license plate reader, I won't. And then your stolen car continues to be stolen. I have the license plate reader, boom, it hits, red thing goes on the screen, I recover your vehicle for you. Mm-hmm. How, as a citizen, do you not like that?
Okay. My last sort of area of questioning concerns this question of the sheriff as the most powerful law enforcement officer in a county. This is a tradition that goes back to the early days of our republic. I'm sure, I don't know, perhaps you're familiar with him, perhaps you're not. Have you ever heard of Sheriff Richard Mack? Mm-hmm. He's the guy that fought the Brady Bill all the way to the Supreme Court, saying that the sheriff, you, or others like you, is not required to enforce federal gun laws. And he won that case, 5-4 decision. It was a close one, but he won. And he says that and he might disagree with you a bit because he says the drug war is a farce in his opinion. He says that the government shouldn't tell people how to live their lives, what to put in their body. So it's sort of a philosophical thing. But his big claim, I think, and the one I want to hear your opinion on, is this idea of the sheriff being the highest law enforcement officer, because this means that if at the county level we were to decide that we don't want, for example, the drug war, or, for example, the war on terror, and again, hypothetically, you presumably would have the power to kick out federal agents. You can do that right now, right? If you want
by statute, yeah.
By statute. You could say to an IRS guy throwing someone out of their home, you could say to a drug cop, you're not doing that in Boone County. You have that, you recognize that authority as sheriff. Okay. So, and again, I mean, this is a very important part of the 10th Amendment, and it's something Justice Scalia talked about in that case with Sheriff Mack. And I know you're familiar with that. Are you familiar with the Oath Keepers? They're this group, somewhat linked to Tea Party and far-right politics, some say, but I do like their general mantra, and that's something they go around to law enforcement officers like yourself, police, sheriff, whatever, and one, they ask you to reaffirm your oath to the Constitution, which I'm pretty sure you did when you came to office, and two, they sort of add a little part that says, for you to recognize the fact that the federal government cannot suspend the Constitution. Whether it's a crisis, martial law, that actually can't happen, that if it does that, it's immediately illegitimate, we could say. What is your opinion on that? Would you agree with the premise that the federal government cannot suspend the Constitution?
You know, I don't know.
I know you're not a legal. You might not be up on the legal scholarship, but just in your opinion, do you think? I mean, because this is what would happen if this happened. They would come to you because you're local law enforcement. They would say, "Look, we've got to put soldiers on the streets. We've got to enforce this stuff." And they're going to come to you. They're going to come to local law enforcement, whether that's cops or sheriffs.
Right.
So what would you, I know that's hypothetical, but what do you think about that? What do you feel about that?
So you're saying they're coming to me and they're saying that they need to do what?
That we've got to close down the newspapers and suspend habeas corpus, for example, like President Lincoln did during the Civil War.
Because of
crazy circumstances. I don't know. War, chaos, famine.
Let's get it done. Whatever we need to do. Because again, the bottom line, it goes back to I'm trying to serve the people that live in this county.
Okay.
And if it is a horrific incident like you're describing, then...
But one that's more prolonged, not like for a day, I guess that's a bad example, but more like maybe a war, maybe just a big economic or civil collapse. Do you think that our rights, our natural rights, that the Constitution recognizes, but which we have by birth, do you think that they can be taken away if the government has special reasons? Or would you just say it depends on the reasons?
Well, it would depend on the reason, and it would be for a temporary period of time. I mean, it's what
okay.
I'm getting your question as.
Right.
Well, not maybe one day, but maybe 3 weeks or maybe 3 months. And so, I think that I would agree with that. If it's the safety of individuals, if it's all hands on deck, I mean, if it's a catastrophe, then hey, let's go. Let's go.
But on the other hand, though, you would agree that if and I understand that this is pretty hypothetical, but there are instances in our country's history where the federal government is acting illegitimately, is doing just wrong, and there isn't really a legitimate crisis at stake. Do you think that in that circumstance, whose side would you take? Would you take the side of the residents of your county?
We're getting into way too many hypotheticals.
No, I know, but I mean, this is important stuff because, but this concerns, your role as sheriff. I mean, you're the highest.
Other questions about tasers?
No, I don't have any other questions. Last question then. Would you ever be willing to do what the Oath Keepers, other sheriffs have done around the country?
No.
You wouldn't? Okay. Thank you.